How can you get jobs in China as an expat without speaking fluent Chinese? That's going to be the topic of today's video. Now, many expats come to Asia without good language skills, at least on day one. Now, in that case, what kind of jobs can you do? Now, a lot of people mistakenly think it only means you can do things like be an English teacher or a translator if you speak numerous, say, European languages or something like that. But in reality, there's quite a lot you can do. Now, number one, you can be a corporate expat. What I mean by that is if you work at Deloitte in the UK, you could get transferred to Deloitte in China, depending on the function of many things. So in almost any industry, you can find it in China because it's a big country, obviously. So for example, even oil and gas, when you think of oil and gas jobs, what do you think of? You think of the Middle East, you even think of Africa. But you know what? Oil and gas in China, it does exist. So for example, in Shenzhen now, I think BP and Shell are in Shenzhen, and they were in Shenzhen 6 years ago, I think, for another project. So almost any industry in the world, you'll find it in China. Same with mining. I think there's some mining in China, including some expats. So if you go on LinkedIn, you can find expats in almost any industry in the world. Obviously, it's going to be harder if you don't speak Chinese, but if you're high level with high skills, you can get transferred to China. Just speaking Chinese will open up more doors for you. Let's say you can't do that, right? And let's say you don't want to do one of the typical jobs like be a translator or teacher or even something like be an embassy worker. A third option is create your own business, but it's not obviously for everyone. So there are many easier countries to start a business in. The whole Hong Kong incorporation model, where you incorporate in Hong Kong, then you live in China, has become harder over time. So that's for some people, but not for everyone. However, if you're a remote worker, it is possible to live in China, for example, on a marriage visa and work remotely if you've got some kind of remote income. However, one thing I would say about this is compared to some countries, the law in China, I'm not a lawyer, obviously it's not legal advice, but the law in China seems a little bit more vague about this issue. What seems to be the case is if you've got a marriage visa in China and you want to work with a Chinese company, you also have to have a work permit in addition to the marriage visa. The marriage visa just allows you to live in China. However, I believe if you've got a marriage visa in China and you've got overseas income, for example, from investments, property or whatever, or an overseas business, that is legal provided you pay tax to the Chinese authorities and actually declare it. So with the way the world is going now, also bear in mind that anyone who can get a visa in China, either through marriage or descent for that matter, I think if you've got a parent from China, it might be possible to get a visa for China. Bear in mind, you don't necessarily have to work in China and get a job in China to live in China in all circumstances, especially with the whole remote trend, but I would get advice on that. Now, another option is to focus on what I would call niches. What do I mean by that? Most companies in China obviously are targeting Chinese people by definition, right? But let's say, for example, you want to work in an expat bar, as an example. I'm sure there are some expat bars in China. I'm not an expert on this. I've never worked in an expat bar, but there must be some expat bars that require you only to speak a very basic level of Chinese and the rest is English, in the same way in some Chinese restaurants and bars in the UK, just having basic level of English is okay. Likewise, if you're doing something like sales or business development, there are plenty of firms in China that are targeting foreigners. So for example, the first company I worked in financial services was a British-owned Chinese company, and we were targeting mainly foreigners or English-speaking Chinese people who used to live overseas. I'm sure there are some law firms who target foreigners. So yes, this is a small niche. It's less than 1% at most. It's probably 0.1% of the total, but China's a big country, and in a place like Shenzhen or Shanghai or even Beijing, you will find these kind of opportunities even if you're not a corporate expat. So I hope that helps, and good luck with your job search if this is applicable for you. How can I help you? In two ways. First of all, are you an expat, a high net wealth individual, or just somebody who lives in a part of the world where it's difficult to get access to quality investment solutions? In which case, go onto my website on adamfayed.com and find out more. If you don't fit into any of those categories, then in which case there's a range of free material on my website, on this YouTube channel, and indeed on my Quora, where I get over 200 or have received over 231 million views in the last few years. And finally, if If you want to actually read my thoughts in more detail, go on to Amazon and find my book on there.